A homeless woman shared her sandwich with a stranger, just one sandwich, all she had in the world. And weeks later, she walked into a mansion. But this wasn't a fairy tale ending handed to her on a silver platter. What you're about to witness isn't a story about charity or luck. It's about something far more powerful. How one moment of genuine human connection can completely rewire two lives in ways that defy every rule of logic and wealth. And the real kicker? The person who changed the most wasn't the one living on the streets. Maya's feet hadn't stopped hurting in 3 years. That's how long she'd been sleeping on concrete. 3 years of waking up to the sound of car horns, police sirens, and the shuffle of other people just trying to survive another day in this city that didn't care if they lived or died. She sat on the corner of 5th and Main, the same spot she'd claimed months ago. It was good real estate in the homeless world. Foot traffic, nearby restaurants that sometimes threw out food, and a storefront overhang that kept the rain off on bad nights. Today wasn't a bad night yet. Today was just cold. Brutally, bone-deep cold that made you question every decision that led you to this moment. Maya pulled her jacket tighter. It wasn't really a jacket anymore. It was more like a collection of holes held together by threads and prayer. She'd found it in a dumpster behind a department store 2 winters ago. Back then, she thought she'd hit rock bottom. She was wrong. Rock bottom was a myth. There was always another level down. Her stomach growled. Not the kind of growl that meant hunger. That was yesterday's growl. Today's growl meant something darker. It meant her body was starting to eat itself. She'd felt this before. That hollow, desperate ache that comes when you haven't had real food in days. Just scraps. Just the half-eaten sandwich someone left on a bench. Just the stale donut from the trash outside the bakery. But today, she had something. Today, she had a sandwich. She'd found it this morning in a paper bag someone had left on the bus stop bench. Turkey and cheese on wheat bread. Not fancy, not fresh, but it was whole. It was real food. And she'd been saving it. Saving it for when things got really bad. For when she needed to remember that good things still existed in the world. Things were getting really bad. The cough came back. It always came back worse in the afternoons. She covered her mouth with the back of her hand, trying to muffle it. But it racked her entire body. People walking past looked away. They always did. It was easier to pretend she didn't exist than to actually see her. She understood. She'd done the same thing before, back when she had a home and a job and a life that made sense. That felt like a different person's memory now. When the cough finally stopped, she tasted blood. Not a lot. Just enough to know that something inside her wasn't working right anymore. She'd been coughing for weeks, maybe months. Time was weird when you were homeless. Days blurred together. You stopped counting them. You just counted survival. She needed to see a doctor. She knew that. But doctors cost money, and money was a concept that belonged to people with addresses and jobs and futures. Maya had none of those things. So instead, she coughed and tried not to think about what it meant. The sun was starting to set. That's when things got dangerous. When the light faded, the city transformed. The good people went home. The dangerous ones came out. And Maya had learned a long time ago that nighttime on the streets was a gamble you played every single night, hoping you'd wake up in the morning. She'd been lucky so far. Mostly lucky. There had been close calls. There had been nights she still had nightmares about. But she was still here, still breathing, still fighting. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like the night where luck ran out. She could feel it in her bones, that sense that something was about to break. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was the cough. Maybe it was just the accumulation of 3 years of sleeping on concrete, of never knowing where her next meal was coming from, of watching people walk past her like she was invisible. Maybe it was all of it combined, pressing down on her like a weight that was finally too heavy to carry. She pulled out the sandwich. It looked even better than she remembered. Turkey and cheese, maybe some lettuce. She could eat this now. She could eat it and feel full for the first time in days. She could eat it and maybe sleep better tonight. She could eat it and survive another day. But as she held it in her hands, something shifted inside her. She looked up. There was a man standing across the street, not looking at her, not really. But there was something about the way he was standing, the way his shoulders were hunched, the way his expensive suit hung on him like it didn't fit anymore, the way his eyes were staring at nothing, that made her stop. He looked like someone who was drowning, not drowning in the same way she was drowning. His drowning was different. He had money. He had a suit that probably cost more than everything she owned combined. He had the kind of shoes that came from stores with actual doors and salespeople who smiled at you. But his drowning was real. She could see it in his face. She could see it in the way he was barely holding it together. He was about to step into traffic. Maya didn't think. She didn't weigh the options. She didn't calculate the cost of what she was about to do. She just stood up, her legs screaming in protest. And she called out, "Hey, wait." The man looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, someone with money, someone with a future, someone with everything was actually seeing her, not looking through her, seeing her. "Are you okay?" she asked. It was a stupid question. He was clearly not okay. But it was the only thing she could think to say. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he walked toward her. Not into traffic. Toward her. Toward the homeless woman sitting on the corner with nothing but a sandwich and the rags on her back. He started. But the words seemed to get stuck somewhere inside him. Maya did something then that she hadn't done in 3 years. She made a choice that defied every survival instinct screaming at her. She held out the sandwich. "You look like you need this more than I do," she said. The man stared at the sandwich like it was the most impossible thing he'd ever seen. Like a homeless woman offering him her only meal was a concept his brain couldn't process. "I can't," he said. "You can," Maya said. "Please, just take it." And he did. He took the sandwich with shaking hands. He looked at it like it was made of gold. Then he looked at her, really looked at her, and something broke open in his face. His eyes filled with tears, real tears, the kind that come from a place so deep inside you that you can't control them. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of evening commuters heading home to their warm apartments and their full refrigerators and their lives that made sense. Maya sat back down on the concrete. Her stomach was empty, emptier than it had been in days. She had just given away her only meal, her only real food, the things she'd been saving for when things got really bad. And things were about to get really, really bad. But what Maya didn't know was that this single decision, this impossible choice to give when she had nothing, would set off a chain of events that would change 2 lives forever. And it would prove something that the world had almost made her forget. That kindness isn't about having enough. It's about choosing to give even when you have nothing at all. His name was David Chen, and he had everything except a reason to live. The penthouse apartment on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower had floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. 3 bedrooms, a chef's kitchen he'd never cooked in, a living room with furniture so expensive that people were afraid to sit on it, original artwork on the walls, the kind that appreciated in value every year, a wine collection worth more than most people's houses. And it was all completely empty. David stood at the window, looking down at the city sprawling beneath him. Somewhere down there, in the maze of streets and buildings and humanity, was the homeless woman who'd just given him her sandwich. He could still feel it in his hands. Turkey and cheese on wheat bread, the most honest thing anyone had ever given him. He'd walked away from her without even asking her name. That was the story of his life, wasn't it? Taking things, taking opportunities, taking credit, taking money, taking relationships, and squeezing them until they broke. And never, ever giving anything real back. He was 53 years old. He'd built a real estate empire from nothing. Started with one small property deal and turned it into a portfolio worth over $200 million. He had a corner office in one of the most prestigious buildings in the city. He had a board of directors who answered to him. He had investors who hung on his every word. He had the kind of success that people dreamed about. He had absolutely nothing that mattered. His first marriage had ended because he was too busy building his empire. His second marriage had ended because he was too rich and too cold and too obsessed with making more money to notice that his wife was leaving him. His third marriage had lasted 6 months. He couldn't even remember her name anymore. Sarah. Susan. It didn't matter. She was just another person he'd failed to be present for. His children, he had 2 from the first marriage, barely spoke to him. His son was 31 and had never asked him for anything. His daughter was 28 and had made it very clear that she didn't want his money or his advice or his presence in her life. They'd sent him a Christmas card last year. A card, not even a phone call. A card with a generic message signed by both of them like he was a distant relative they felt obligated to acknowledge. He deserved it. The business was crumbling, though nobody knew it yet. David had been making reckless decisions for the past 2 years. Deals that didn't make sense. Investments that were clearly going to fail. He'd been sabotaging himself without even realizing it. Subconsciously trying to destroy everything he'd built because he couldn't stand the thought of spending another day in this empty empire. His therapist, the 4th one in 5 years, had suggested that he might be depressed. David had laughed. Depressed? He had everything. How could he possibly be depressed? But the therapist had just looked at him with those patient, understanding eyes and said, "Exactly." Last week, David had bought a gun. It was sitting in his desk drawer right now, loaded and ready. He'd looked at it every morning for the past 7 days, trying to work up the courage, trying to figure out the logistics. Should he leave a note? Should he leave his money to charity? Should he try to make amends with his children first? But every time he thought about actually doing it, something stopped him. Not hope. He didn't have hope. But maybe something like inertia. The weight of his own existence keeping him in motion even though he desperately wanted to stop. Today, he'd finally decided. Today was the day. He'd walked out of his office at noon, told his assistant he was taking the rest of the day off, and he'd just started walking. He didn't have a destination. He just knew that he wanted to get far away from his building, far away from his life, far away from everything. He'd been walking for hours when he found himself on 5th and Main, a part of the city he rarely visited, a part where the homeless people gathered, a part where the real world existed, the world he'd spent his entire life trying to escape. And then he'd seen her. She was sitting on the concrete like she belonged there, like she'd accepted her place in the world and made peace with it. There was a dignity to her that David hadn't seen in anyone in years. Everyone around him was performing. Everyone was trying to be something other than what they were. But this woman, this homeless woman with nothing, was just being. And then she'd offered him her sandwich. He'd walked away from her because he couldn't process what had just happened. He'd walked away because accepting kindness from someone with nothing felt like the cruelest thing he could possibly do. He'd walked away because he was a coward. And now he was back in his penthouse, and the gun was still in his desk drawer, and everything felt even more impossible than before. Because that sandwich had done something to him. It had cracked something open. It had shown him that there was still goodness in the world, still people who could give, even when they had nothing, still moments where human connection was more real than anything money could buy. And it had made him realize that he'd spent his entire life running away from exactly that. From connection, from vulnerability, from the possibility of being truly seen by another person. He pulled out his phone. He had 100 unread emails. His assistant had called 4 times. His business partner had sent 3 urgent messages. The world was still spinning, still demanding things from him, still expecting him to perform his role as David Chen, the successful real estate mogul. He deleted all the messages without reading them. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He called his daughter. It rang 4 times before she answered. "Dad?" Her voice was surprised, cautious, like she was bracing for bad news. "Hi, sweetheart," he said, and his voice broke. Actually broke, like he was a human being with feelings instead of a machine designed to make money. "Are you okay?" she asked. "No," he said. "No, I'm not. And I think I've never been okay. I think I've been running my entire life, and I don't even know what I've been running from anymore." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry," he continued. "I'm sorry for all of it. For missing your childhood, for being absent, for choosing work over you, for being the kind of father who sends money instead of love. I'm sorry." He could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "Where are you right now?" she finally asked. "I'm home, in the penthouse." Are you safe?" It was such a simple question, such an important question. And it made him realize that his daughter had been worried about him, that she cared enough to ask, that despite everything he'd done, despite every way he'd failed her, she still loved him enough to be concerned about his safety. "I don't know," he said, honestly, "but I'm going to be. I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to do better. Not because I'm trying to fix things, but because I finally understand that there are things more important than money." "What happened?" she asked. And he told her. He told her about the homeless woman and the sandwich. He told her about how someone with nothing had shown him more kindness than anyone with everything ever had. He told her that he thought he'd been broken his entire life, and he was finally starting to understand why. When he hung up the phone, he felt different. Not better, not fixed. But like maybe, just maybe, there was a possibility of being better. A possibility of being the kind of person who could receive kindness without feeling like he had to pay for it. A possibility of being human. He walked to his desk and opened the drawer. The gun was still there, gleaming in the afternoon light. But he didn't pick it up. Instead, he picked up his wallet and his keys, and he walked out of the penthouse. He had to find that woman again. He had to understand what had happened to him in that moment when she'd offered him her sandwich. He had to figure out how to repay a debt that couldn't possibly be repaid with money. And what David didn't know was that this moment of choosing to live, to connect, to be vulnerable, would set off a chain of events that would transform not just his life, but hers as well. And it would prove that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness aren't about grand gestures or massive donations. They're about showing up. They're about being present. They're about choosing to see another human being and acknowledging their worth. David didn't sleep that night. He didn't even try. Instead, he sat in his car, a Tesla that cost more than most people's annual salary, parked on 5th and Main, watching the street, watching for her. He'd driven down to the neighborhood around midnight, armed with a thermos of coffee and a desperation he couldn't quite explain. The streets were different at night, darker, more dangerous. The homeless people who'd been scattered during the day had consolidated into groups, huddled under overhangs and in doorways, trying to survive another cold night. David watched them and felt something he'd never felt before. Shame. Real, bone-deep shame at how much he had, while they had so little. He didn't see her. By 3 a.m, he was starting to panic. What if she'd moved? What if she'd gone to a shelter? What if she'd gotten sick? That cough he'd heard when she spoke to him sounded bad, and ended up in a hospital or worse. He pulled out his phone and did something he'd never done before. He called his assistant at 3 a.m. "Mr. Chen?" She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy with sleep. "Is everything okay?" "I need you to do something for me," he said. "And I need you to do it without asking questions." "Of course, sir." "There's a homeless woman who frequents the corner of 5th and Main. Mid-40s maybe. Dark hair with some gray. She has a cough. I need you to find her. I need you to find out everything you can about her." There was a pause. "Sir, I'm not sure how to—" "Figure it out," he said. And he heard the old David Chen in his voice, the demanding, impatient version who was used to getting his way. He softened. "Please, it's important. More important than anything I've ever asked you to do." "I'll try, Mr. Chen. But it might take some time." "I know. Thank you." He hung up and went back to waiting. By dawn, he'd drunk the entire thermos of coffee, and his hands were shaking. Not from the caffeine, from the fear that he'd never find her again. That this one moment of connection had been a fluke, a random intersection of two broken people that would never be repeated. But then, as the sun was rising and the city was starting to wake up, he saw her. She was walking down the street, moving slowly, like every step took tremendous effort. She was coughing, that same terrible cough he'd heard yesterday, and she was holding her side like it hurt to breathe. David got out of the car. "Hey," he called out. "Hey, wait." She turned, and for a moment, he saw fear flash across her face. He realized how this must look, a well-dressed man in an expensive suit, calling out to a homeless woman on the street at dawn. She probably thought he was going to hurt her or harass her or worse. "It's okay," he said, putting his hands up in a peaceful gesture. "It's me, from yesterday, the sandwich." Recognition flickered in her eyes, then confusion, then something like wariness. "I know this is weird," he said, walking toward her slowly, non-threateningly. "But I need to talk to you. I need to thank you properly, and I need to help you." "I don't need help," she said, but her voice was weak, tired, like she'd been saying this lie for so long that even she didn't believe it anymore. "You're sick," he said. "That cough—" "I'm fine," she interrupted. But another cough racked her body, and she doubled over, clutching her side. When she straightened up, there was blood on her hand. "You're not fine," David said. "You need a doctor. You need medical attention. Please, let me help you." She looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language, like the concept of someone wanting to help her was so foreign that she couldn't even comprehend it. "Why?" she asked. "Because you helped me," he said. "Yesterday, you gave me your sandwich. You saw that I was drowning, and you threw me a lifeline. Now I'm throwing one back." "That's not how it works," she said. "Kindness isn't a transaction. You don't help someone and then expect them to help you back." "I'm not expecting anything," he said. I'm asking you to let me help. Please." She studied his face for a long moment, and he could see her weighing her options. Pride versus survival. Independence versus accepting help. He knew that choice intimately. He'd been making it his entire life, choosing pride and independence and self-reliance over the vulnerability of asking for help. "What's your name?" she finally asked. "David. David Chen." "I'm Maya," she said. "Maya Reeves." "It's nice to meet you properly, Maya," he said. "Now please, let me take you to a hospital. Let me get you checked out. Whatever you need, I can help with." "I don't have insurance," Maya said. "I can't afford—" "I can," David interrupted. "I can afford it. Please, just let me do this one thing." Maya looked down at her hands, at the blood, at the reality of her situation that she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." The hospital visit took most of the day. David sat in the waiting room while Maya was examined, and he did something he hadn't done in years. He thought about someone other than himself. He thought about what her life must be like. Sleeping on concrete, never knowing where her next meal was coming from. Dealing with illness alone, having no one to advocate for her, no one to care whether she lived or died. And he thought about how close he'd come to not being here, how close he'd come to taking the gun from his desk drawer and ending his own life. How a sandwich, a single act of kindness from a woman with nothing, had saved him. When Maya came out of the examination room, her face was pale. "What did they say?" David asked, standing up. "Pneumonia," she said. "Bad pneumonia. They want me to stay for a few days. They want to run some tests. They said if I'd waited much longer." She trailed off, but they both knew what she wasn't saying. If she'd waited much longer, she would have died. "Then you'll stay," David said. "You'll get treated. You'll get better." "I can't afford." "I said I'll pay for it," he interrupted gently. "Maya, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me spend some of it on keeping you alive. Please." She looked at him, and he could see the tears forming in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because you saved my life," he said. "And because I'm tired of being the kind of person who takes and never gives. And because you deserve to live. You deserve to be healthy and safe and taken care of." "Nobody deserves that," Maya said bitterly. "Not people like me." "Especially people like you," David said. "Because you're the ones who understand what it means to be human. You're the ones who can give when you have nothing. You're the ones who can see another person's pain and respond with compassion instead of fear." He paused. "You saved my life, Maya. Not with the sandwich, but with the choice to give it. With the choice to see me when I was invisible to myself. Let me save yours. Let me be the kind of person who gives back." Maya nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Over the next few days, as Maya recovered in the hospital, David started making changes. He called his business partner and told him he was stepping back from the company. He didn't explain why. He just said that he needed to reassess his priorities. His partner thought he was crazy, David didn't care. He called his therapist and scheduled regular appointments. Real appointments. Not just check-ins to manage his depression, but actual work to understand why he'd built an empire and then tried to destroy it. He called his children and invited them to dinner. Both of them said yes. He was shocked. And he spent hours every day at the hospital with Maya, talking to her, listening to her story, understanding how a person ends up homeless and broken and alone. Her story wasn't unique. It was the story of so many people in this city. A bad marriage, a job loss, a health crisis, a series of small failures that accumulated into one catastrophic collapse. She'd tried to climb back up, but the system wasn't designed for people like her. There was no safety net. There was just a long, slow fall into oblivion. "What happens when I get out of here?" Maya asked on the 4th day, when the doctors had said she was well enough to be discharged. "You come stay with me," David said, "in my apartment. You rest, you recover, you figure out what you want to do next." "I can't just move into your apartment," Maya said. "People will talk. They'll think." "I don't care what they think," David said. "And neither should you. You need a place to stay. I have a place. It's that simple." "It's never that simple," Maya said. "It is now," David said. "I'm making it simple. I'm choosing to be the kind of person who helps. I'm choosing to give back. I'm choosing to see you and acknowledge your worth. And I'm not going to apologize for that." Maya looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. Something like hope. Like maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cruel and indifferent as she'd come to believe. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Thank you." "Don't thank me," David said. "You already thanked me with a sandwich." The penthouse had never felt like a home before. It had felt like a monument to David's success. A trophy case. A place to display wealth and taste and status. But the moment Maya walked through the door, something shifted. She moved slowly, still weak from the pneumonia, but her eyes were wide as she took in the space. The floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern furniture, the original artwork. The view of the entire city spread out beneath them, like a kingdom. "This is..." she started, but the words seemed to fail her. "Too much?" David asked gently. "Impossible," she finished. "This is impossible. People don't live like this." "Some people do," David said. "I do. And now you do too. For as long as you need to." He'd prepared the guest bedroom for her, the one that faced the park, with the softest linens he could find, and a view that would make her feel less trapped by the walls of the building. He'd stocked the kitchen with healthy food. He'd arranged for a private nurse to check on her, daily. He'd done everything he could think of to make her comfortable. But what he hadn't anticipated was how much her presence would change him. Over the next 2 weeks, as Maya recovered, David's life began to reorganize itself around her needs. He stopped going to the office. He stopped taking calls from his business partner. He stopped thinking about money and deals and growth and expansion. Instead, he cooked for her. He sat with her while she recovered. He listened to her stories. And slowly, piece by piece, he began to understand the full scope of what he'd been missing his entire life. Maya had been married once, to a man who seemed perfect at first, charming, ambitious, successful. But over the years, he'd become controlling, abusive, not physically, but emotionally. He'd isolated her from her friends. He'd controlled her money. He'd made her feel like she was worthless without him. When she finally left, she had nothing. No job history because he'd convinced her to quit work. No savings because he'd controlled the finances. No support system because he'd cut her off from everyone who cared about her. She'd spent 3 years trying to rebuild, but every time she got close, something would happen. A health crisis, a job that didn't work out, bad luck that felt personal. And then she'd ended up on the streets. The worst part? Maya told David one evening as they sat on the balcony watching the sun set. Wasn't the hunger or the cold or the fear. It was the invisibility. It was knowing that I could die tomorrow and nobody would care. That I'd become less than human in people's eyes. That I deserved to be invisible because I'd failed at life. You didn't fail, David said. The system failed you. The people in your life failed you. But you didn't fail. How can you say that? Maya asked. I ended up homeless. That's the definition of failure. No, David said. Failure would have been giving up. Failure would have been not trying. But you survived. You kept going. You found a way to give kindness even when you had nothing. That's not failure. That's the opposite of failure. Maya looked at him, and he could see something breaking open in her. Something that had been locked away for so long that she'd forgotten it was there. Hope. Real hope. The kind that comes from being truly seen by another person. Meanwhile, David's relationship with his daughter was healing in ways he never thought possible. He'd invited her to dinner at the penthouse, and when she walked in and saw Maya, her eyes went wide. Dad, what's going on? She asked. This is Maya, David said. She's staying with me for a while. She's recovering from pneumonia. His daughter, her name was Sophie, looked between David and Maya with an expression that was somewhere between confusion and suspicion. Can I talk to you in the kitchen? She asked. David followed her, and she immediately turned on him. Dad, what is this? Are you okay? Is this some kind of midlife crisis? No, David said. It's the opposite of a midlife crisis. It's me finally starting to live. Maya gave me her sandwich when I was standing on a street corner thinking about ending my life. She saw that I was drowning and she threw me a lifeline. Now I'm throwing one back. Sophie stared at him. You were thinking about ending your life? She asked quietly. Yes, David said. But I'm not anymore. I'm thinking about living. Really living. Not just existing. Not just accumulating money and status and things. But actually connecting with another human being. Actually making a difference. Actually being the kind of person I should have been all along. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I've been so angry at you, she said. For so long. For being absent. For choosing work over me. For being cold and distant and unavailable. And I thought if I just cut you out of my life, it would hurt you the way you hurt me. It did, David said. It absolutely did. And you were right to do it. You were protecting yourself. But I'm different now. I want to be different. Not because I want to fix things between us, but because I finally understand what matters. Sophie stepped forward and hugged him. It was the first real hug they'd shared in years, and David felt something break open in his chest. Something that had been locked away since she was a child, and he'd been too busy building his empire to notice her growing up. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry. I know, she said, and I forgive you. But you have to actually change. You can't just say these things and then go back to being the same person. I know, David said, and I will. I'm going to be different. I'm going to be better. By the end of the second week, Maya was well enough to move around the apartment without assistance. The pneumonia had cleared. Her color was coming back. She was eating regularly and sleeping well and starting to look like a person who might have a future. But she was also restless. I can't stay here forever, she said one morning as they sat at the breakfast table, looking out at the city. I need to figure out what I'm going to do. I need to rebuild my life. I know, David said, but you don't have to do it alone. Let me help you. How? Maya asked. What could you possibly do to help me get a job? I have no work history. I have no references. I have no skills that anyone wants. You have more skills than you think, David said. You survived 3 years on the streets. That takes intelligence, resilience, creativity, and strength. You can learn anything. We just need to figure out what you want to do. I don't know what I want to do, Maya said. I haven't thought about the future in so long. I've just been focused on getting through each day. Then we'll figure it out together, David said. What did you want to do before? Before your marriage? Before everything fell apart? Maya thought for a moment. I wanted to be a counselor. She said quietly. I wanted to help people. I was studying psychology in college when I met my ex-husband. He convinced me that I didn't need to work, that he could take care of me. So I quit. And then I never went back. Then we'll get you back to school, David said. We'll finish your degree. We'll get you the training you need. And then you can help people. You can use your experience to help other people who've been through what you've been through. That's crazy, Maya said. I'm too old. I'm too broken. I've been homeless. Nobody's going to take me seriously. They will if I'm behind you, David said. And besides, you're not broken. You're the strongest person I know. You gave me your sandwich when you had nothing. You saw that I was drowning and you helped me. That's not broken. That's whole. That's the kind of person who should be a counselor. Maya looked at him, and he could see the tears forming again. Why are you doing this? She asked for the 100th time. Because you saved my life, David said. And because this is what life is supposed to be about. Not accumulating wealth, not building empires, but lifting each other up, being there for each other, seeing each other's pain and responding with compassion. He paused. And because I love you, he said quietly. The words hung in the air between them. Not romantic love, but something deeper, something more fundamental. The love that comes from truly knowing another person, from seeing their worst moments and their best moments and loving them anyway, from being willing to sacrifice for them, from choosing to be present. I love you too, Maya said. I don't know how it happened so fast, but I do. Over the next 3 months, David and Maya began to build a new life together. Not a romantic life, not yet anyway, but a life of partnership and mutual support and genuine connection. David enrolled Maya in a community college program to finish her psychology degree. He hired a tutor to help her catch up on the material she'd missed. He attended her classes with her, sitting in the back of the room, cheering her on. Maya blossomed. She was brilliant. She asked thoughtful questions. She challenged the professor's assumptions. She brought a perspective to the classroom that nobody else had, the perspective of someone who'd lived through real trauma and real hardship. Her classmates were drawn to her. Her professors recognized her potential. Within a semester, she was at the top of her class. Meanwhile, David was making his own changes. He stepped down from his company completely. He sold his stake to his business partner at a fair price and walked away. He kept enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life, but he donated the rest to various charities, homeless shelters, mental health organizations, job training programs. He was using his wealth to help people in the way he should have been using it all along. He also started volunteering. He spent 3 days a week at a homeless shelter helping people find resources, helping them apply for jobs, listening to their stories, being present in a way he'd never been present for anyone before. And he reconnected with his children. His son came to visit, and David apologized for being absent. His son, who'd spent 31 years building walls to protect himself from his father's indifference, finally let those walls come down. They had a real conversation. They made plans to have dinner together every month. Sophie became a regular visitor to the penthouse. She and Maya became friends. They'd sit on the balcony and talk about life and dreams and the future. Sophie told David that she'd never seen him happier, that she'd never seen him more alive. "It's like you finally figured out how to be human," she said one evening. "I had a good teacher," David said, looking at Maya. 6 months after Maya walked into David's life with nothing but a sandwich and a moment of kindness, she was preparing to graduate from her community college program. She'd been accepted to a 4-year university to complete her bachelor's degree in psychology. She was already working part-time at a nonprofit that helped homeless individuals transition back into society. David threw her a graduation party. He invited Sophie and his son. He invited Maya's classmates and professors. He invited people from the shelter where he volunteered. He invited people from the nonprofit where Maya worked. The penthouse was filled with people, with laughter, with genuine human connection. And as David watched Maya accept congratulations from everyone around her, he thought about that moment on 5th and Main. That moment when he'd been standing on the edge of the abyss, ready to step into traffic. That moment when a homeless woman with nothing had seen him and offered him her sandwich. That one moment had changed everything. Not because it had been a grand gesture, but because it had been real, because it had been authentic, because it had been one human being seeing another human being and choosing to help. And that was the truth that David had finally learned. The greatest acts of kindness aren't about how much you have. They're about being willing to give what you have, even if it's nothing. They're about seeing another person's pain and choosing to respond with compassion instead of fear. Maya came over to him, and she took his hand. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For seeing me," she said. "For choosing to help. For changing your life to help me change mine." "You did that," David said. "You changed my life first. I'm just returning the favor." "No," Maya said. "We changed each other's lives. That's what real connection is. It's not about one person saving another. It's about 2 broken people coming together and making each other whole." David pulled her close, and as he looked out at the city spread out beneath them, at all the people down there struggling and surviving and fighting, he realized something fundamental. The mansion wasn't what had changed him. The money wasn't what had changed him. The success wasn't what had changed him. It was the sandwich. It was the moment of genuine human connection. It was being truly seen by another person and choosing to see them back. That was the real wealth. That was what mattered. And he would spend the rest of his life making sure that other people understood that too. 1 year later, David and Maya stood in front of a small brick building on the edge of downtown. The sign above the door read, "The Sandwich Project, a bridge back to life." It had started as a conversation between them late one night. Maya was finishing her undergraduate degree and working full-time at the nonprofit. David was volunteering at the shelter and donating money to various causes. But they both felt like something was missing. They were helping individuals, but they weren't addressing the systemic issues that created homelessness in the first place. "What if we created something?" Maya had asked. "Something that combined everything we've learned. something that could actually change lives on a larger scale. And so the Sandwich Project was born. It wasn't just a homeless shelter. It was a comprehensive program designed to help people transition from homelessness back into society. And it was all built on a philosophy that David and Maya had developed together, that every person deserved to be seen, deserved to be valued, deserved to have someone believe in their potential to rebuild their life. The first client they took on was a man named Marcus. He'd been homeless for 8 years after a series of bad decisions and worse luck. He was skeptical when David and Maya first approached him about the program. He'd been let down too many times before. But something about their approach was different. They didn't treat him like a charity case. They didn't make him feel like he was broken and needed to be fixed. Instead, they treated him like a human being with potential. They listened to his story. They understood his struggles. And they helped him develop a plan to rebuild his life. Within 6 months, Marcus had a job. Within a year, he had his own apartment. Within 2 years, he was volunteering at the Sandwich Project, helping other homeless individuals navigate the system. "I want to give back," Marcus told David one day. "I want to help other people the way you helped me." "Then do it," David said. "That's what this is all about. It's about creating a chain of kindness. One person helps another person, and then that person helps another person, and so on. Until eventually, the whole world is different." Word spread about the Sandwich Project. Local media picked up the story. National news outlets started calling. Within a year, they had a waiting list of over 200 people. David and Maya knew they couldn't handle the demand with just the two of them. So they hired staff. They recruited volunteers. They partnered with other nonprofits and government agencies. They created a network of support that extended far beyond the walls of their building. And they started training other people to replicate the model in other cities. But success brought its own challenges. One evening, about 18 months after the Sandwich Project opened, David and Maya were having dinner when Sophie called. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something," she said, her voice serious. "What's wrong?" David asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing's wrong," Sophie said. "Actually, everything's right. I've been thinking about my career, and I want to make a change. I want to work for the Sandwich Project." David was stunned. "Sophie, you have a great job. You're a successful lawyer. Why would you want to leave that?" "Because I want to do what you're doing," she said. "I want to help people. I've been watching what you and Maya have built, and I want to be part of it. I think I could help with the legal aspects. I could help people navigate the system. I could help them fight for their rights." "Are you sure?" David asked. "I've never been more sure of anything," Sophie said. "You showed me what it means to live with purpose. Now I want to do it too." David felt tears forming in his eyes. "Okay," he said. "Welcome to the team." As the Sandwich Project grew, David and Maya's relationship evolved as well. It happened gradually. One day they were partners in a mission. The next day they were partners in life. There was no dramatic moment, no grand romantic gesture, just a slow realization that they were meant to be together, that their connection had always been deeper than friendship or partnership. One evening, as they were sitting on the balcony of David's penthouse, which was now also Maya's home, David asked her to marry him. He didn't get down on one knee. He didn't have a fancy ring. He just took her hand and asked her the question. "Will you marry me?" Not because you have to, not because it's expected, but because you want to spend the rest of your life with me building this thing together, helping people together, being human together? Maya said yes, and they got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with Sophie, David's son, and a group of clients from the Sandwich Project who'd become like family. 2 years after the Sandwich Project opened, David received a letter. It was from a woman named Jennifer. He didn't recognize the name at first, but as he read the letter, he realized who she was. It was the woman he'd been married to third, the one he couldn't even remember the name of. Except now he did. Jennifer. Of course. How could he have forgotten? The letter said, "Dear David, I don't know if you remember me. We were married for 6 months, and I know I wasn't the best wife. I was angry with you for being cold and distant and unavailable. But I was also angry with myself for thinking that I could change you, for thinking that my love would be enough to make you human. I saw the news coverage about the Sandwich Project. I saw you talking about how a homeless woman's act of kindness changed your life. And I realized something. I tried to give you that same gift. I tried to show you what it meant to be loved unconditionally, to be seen and valued for who you are, not for what you've accomplished. But you weren't ready to receive it. You weren't ready to be human. I'm not angry anymore. I'm actually proud of you. Proud of the work you're doing. Proud of the person you've become. And I wanted you to know that. I wanted you to know that sometimes people plant seeds, and they don't see them grow. But that doesn't mean the seeds weren't important. I'm happy now. I'm married to a wonderful man. We have a daughter. We're living a good life. And I think part of the reason I was able to find that happiness is because I learned, through my relationship with you, what I needed in a partner, what I needed in a life. So thank you. Thank you for being the person who taught me what I didn't want. And congratulations on becoming the person you were meant to be all along. With warmth and respect, Jennifer. David read the letter 3 times. And each time, he felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Not just for Jennifer's kindness in writing the letter, but for his own journey, for all the mistakes he'd made, for all the people he'd hurt, for the fact that even those failures had led him to where he was now. He showed the letter to Maya. "This is beautiful," Maya said, reading it. "She's right. You needed to go through all of that to become who you are now." "I wish I could have been better sooner," David said. "I wish I hadn't wasted so much time. I wish I hadn't hurt so many people." "You can't change the past," Maya said, "but you can honor it by being better now." And you are. You're so much better. By year 3, the Sandwich Project had helped over 500 people transition from homelessness back into society. They'd opened satellite locations in 3 other cities. They were training other organizations to replicate their model. They were starting to see real systemic change. But more importantly, they were seeing individual lives transform. There was Marcus, who now worked as a peer counselor at the Sandwich Project, helping other homeless individuals navigate the system. There was a woman named Keisha, who'd been homeless for 5 years after her ex-husband had abused her and left her with nothing. She'd gone through the Sandwich Project program, gotten her GED, completed job training, and was now working as an administrative assistant at a law firm. Sophie had helped her fight for custody of her children, and she just moved into a small house with them. There was a man named Robert, who'd been addicted to drugs for 20 years. He'd been homeless for 10 of those years. He'd gone through the Sandwich Project substance abuse treatment program, gotten clean, and was now working in construction. He was saving money to go back to school. There were hundreds of stories like these. Hundreds of people whose lives had been transformed by someone seeing them, believing in them, and helping them rebuild. And at the center of it all was the philosophy that David and Maya had developed, that every person deserves to be seen, deserves to have someone believe in their potential, deserves to have a chance to rebuild their life. One evening, David was walking through the shelter when he saw a young man sitting alone in the corner. He looked familiar. David approached him carefully. "Hi," David said. "I'm David. What's your name?" "James," the young man said, looking up. His eyes were hollow, desperate, like someone who'd lost hope. "How long have you been on the streets?" David asked. 3 months, James said. "I lost my job. Couldn't pay rent, and then everything just fell apart." David sat down next to him. "I know that feeling," David said. "I've been there. Not on the streets, but in that place where it feels like everything is falling apart. Like there's no way out." "There's always a way out for people like you," James said bitterly. "You have money. You have options." "I do now," David said. "But I didn't always have perspective. I didn't always understand what mattered. And I almost didn't make it to where I am now. I almost ended my life." James looked at him with surprise. "Really?" he asked. "Really," David said. "I was standing on a street corner, ready to step into traffic, and a homeless woman saw me. She saw that I was drowning, and she offered me her sandwich, her only meal. And that one act of kindness saved my life." "Why?" James asked. "Why would she do that?" "Because that's what humans do," David said. "When we're at our best, we see each other's pain, and we respond with compassion. We help each other. We lift each other up." David paused. "I want to help you," he said. "I want to help you get back on your feet. Not because I pity you, but because I see potential in you. I see someone who's going through a hard time, but who can rebuild, who can have a future. Will you let me help?" James looked at him for a long moment, and then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'll try." And as David helped James to his feet and led him to the intake office, he thought about that moment on 5th and Main, that moment when a homeless woman had seen him and offered him her sandwich, that moment that had changed everything. Because that's what this was all about. It wasn't about grand gestures or massive donations. It was about one person seeing another person's pain and choosing to help. It was about creating a chain reaction of kindness. It was about understanding that we're all connected, that we all matter, that we all deserve to be seen and valued and believed in. And as long as there were people like Maya in the world, people who could give even when they had nothing, there was hope. There was always hope. 5 years had passed since David Chen stood on the corner of 5th and Main, ready to end his life. A homeless woman named Maya had offered him her sandwich and changed everything. Now, David sat in his office at the Sandwich Project's main headquarters. The organization had expanded far beyond their expectations. They operated in 12 cities across the country, helped over 3,000 people transition from homelessness, and trained hundreds of social workers and volunteers. Most importantly, they'd created a movement based on one simple idea. Every person deserves to be seen. Maya walked in with 2 cups of coffee and kissed the top of his head. After 5 years of marriage, these small gestures still made David's heart skip. She sat down across from him. "The training session went well," Maya said. "Representatives from 4 new cities want to implement our model. I think we're going to see real growth this year." David nodded. Maya had become the director of training and expansion. She traveled constantly, helping organizations understand and implement their philosophy. She was brilliant at it. I got a call from the mayor's office, David said. They want to expand our services and fund a second location in the city. That's wonderful, Maya said. We could help so many more people. Maya paused thoughtfully. I've been thinking about creating a documentary, something that tells our story and shows people what's possible when we choose to help each other. David leaned forward with interest. That's a great idea. We could reach millions of people and inspire others to start their own organizations. Over the next 6 months, a filmmaker named Rachel followed David and Maya's work. She captured them counseling clients, training staff, and working at the shelter. She showed the complexity of homeless individuals' lives, their intelligence, resilience, and dignity. One powerful scene featured Marcus, their first client, who'd been homeless for 8 years. They saw me, he said, tears streaming down his face. Nobody had seen me in years. David and Maya saw me, and it changed everything. Another scene featured Keisha, who'd escaped an abusive marriage. I thought I'd lost my children forever. But Sophie believed in me and fought for me. Now we're a family again with a home and a future. The documentary, titled The Sandwich Project, One Act of Kindness Changes Everything, premiered at a film festival and went viral. Within weeks, millions had viewed it. Within months, a major streaming service picked it up. The response was overwhelming. People from across the country wanted to start their own chapters, volunteer, and donate. But not everyone was supportive. A journalist named Patricia contacted David for a critical interview. She questioned his past, how he'd built wealth on underpaid workers and accumulated money while others struggled. Isn't this just guilt-driven charity? She asked. You're right, David admitted. Part of what I'm doing is driven by guilt. But guilt without action is self-indulgence. What matters is real change, reorganizing your life around helping others. That's redemption. Do you think you've redeemed yourself? Patricia asked. No, David said honestly. Redemption isn't something you achieve and move on from. It's something you work toward every single day. I'll never undo the harm I've caused. All I can do is create more good than the harm I've caused. The article was fair and acknowledged that what David and Maya were building was real and creating genuine systemic change. As the documentary gained traction, wealthy individuals started reaching out. They wanted to know how to find meaning and purpose in their lives and use their wealth to create real change. David started hosting monthly sandwich circle meetings where wealthy people gathered to discuss how they could help others. They shared struggles, challenged each other, and held each other accountable. One member was Richard, a hedge fund manager who'd made hundreds of millions, but was deeply unhappy. His marriages had failed, his children didn't speak to him, and he had no real friendships. I don't know how to change, Richard said at one meeting, his voice breaking. David looked at him with compassion. You start by seeing someone who's struggling. You ask yourself, what if this person was me? Then you help. You keep showing up. You keep seeing people. Eventually, it changes you. It makes you human. By the end of year 5, the Sandwich Project had become a movement. They operated in 20 cities, helped over 5,000 people, and inspired hundreds of wealthy individuals to use their resources to help others. Most importantly, they'd created a cultural shift showing that a life built on compassion and connection was more valuable than one built on accumulation and status. On the 5th anniversary of David's darkest moment, the Sandwich Project threw a celebration. They invited everyone who'd been part of their journey: clients, staff, volunteers, board members, donors, and family members. Marcus stood up and addressed the crowd. 5 years ago, I was broken and hopeless. David and Maya saw me as a human being with potential. They changed my life. But look around this room. They've changed thousands of lives. One sandwich, one act of kindness, and it changed everything. David sat with his arm around Maya, tears streaming down his face. He thought about how close he'd come to not being here, to missing all of this. He'd finally learned the greatest truth. The greatest wealth isn't money, status, or power. It's connection. It's being seen by another person. It's knowing that you matter. As the celebration continued, David squeezed Maya's hand. She squeezed back. They both understood. They'd found purpose, meaning, and each other. They'd found a way to change the world, one sandwich at a time,